What you know, Joe?
I don't know nothing.
What you know, Joe?
Tell me something.
Welcome to the What You Know, Joe podcast. Today I have a special guest, someone I've wanted to talk with for a very long time. This gentleman is one of my oldest and dearest friends. We know each other forever. We've traveled together, we've gone to sporting events together, and we have laughed together. But the thing for which I'm most grateful is it was from this gentleman that I learned what it was to be a professional. So I give you the multi-talented, highly successful Michael Hertzberg. Hiya, Mike. Welcome.
Good morning, Joe.
Mike, how does a kid from the Bronx know at an early age they want to be in the film business or the entertainment business? Had you always known? Did you grow up knowing, or did the light just go on one day?
Oh, for me, it was more of a practical thing, Joe. Not rolling in money as a youngster. I had to work in the summers. One summer, I carried bolts of material around the garment business like a lot of New Yorkers. And this particular year, I answered an ad for being a messenger at a film company, documentary films and commercials, army films. And I got interested in the editing portion of it. And the editors were very generous to me in teaching me things. And it something clicked, enjoying doing that kind of work. And so I transferred after my sophomore year in Hunter College and went to CCNY Film School at night and continued working and worked my way into the editing room as an assistant editor.
Incredible. Because editing is kind of solitary, and yet you were a wonderful assistant director who could move men and materials around, and you had their respect, and that's interesting. We met at an outfit called VPI, Video Productions Incorporated, right? It was a commercial house. How did you get to VPI?
I remember Ted Zachary was there when another one of our assistants who went on to great fame, and I just became a home for me because there weren't that many features in New York at the time.
Right.
So doing commercials as an assistant director was a home for me. I did have some luck though, Joe. I mean, you talk about careers and luck. Part of the reason I switched into production from editing was that the other assistants didn't like the speed at which I worked, and they ratted me out to the union as working too fast. And the union then refused me entrance into the union, and also refused me the ability to work. And the people at this was TV graphics liked me and switched me into production, and that changed the course of my whole life.
Yeah, for sure. I remember being at VPI, and I went into the sales reels department, and I had to get into production, and their vice president, I think his name was, black hair, greasy, with a red jacket. His name was Shelley Satin. And I used to think to myself, come on, nobody in this business looks like that is named Shelley Satin. But it was, and he turned out to be a good guy, and he's the reason I got into production. But in production, I met yourself and Teddy and Freddie Gallo and Alex Haps. I mean, I just met the creme de la creme of New York assistants. When and how did you know you had to go to California to?
I came out on a magic carpet, Joe. I had met Mel Brooks on the producers. I was his assistant director. We then formed a pretty good partnership in that we did the producers, the 12 chairs. And then the long answer to your California question is we ended up with Blazing Saddles, and we came out here to do Blazing Saddles.
I see.
I came out here and I was working. I realized we're coal miners and the coal is here. New York, people would just come in to shoot because they wanted New York. But the actual business was in California.
Right.
And so we bought a house right after we finished Blazing Saddles, and we're here. It's only
Yeah,
50 years later.
yeah. Abe Burrows said, I jumped into my pool one day, and when I swam to the other side, it was 20 years later. That's a
Yeah,
California
yeah.
thing. No, I realized quickly in New York that the jobs went to New York, but they originated in California,
The
which is,
business,
but did you have any trouble transferring? Because Don, I forget his last name, but looked me right in the eye and lied to me, said you can't work in California. You need so many days and blah, blah, it was all that stuff.
well, Joe, remember, I was no longer working in category
Ah,
in PGA. I was a producer at this point.
right.
Starting with the 12 chairs, the picture before Blazing Saddles.
Ah,
I then was a producer. And so that had nothing to do with the DGA.
I see. I see. But you've worked with a lot of directors. Other than Mel, which directors stand out to you? Did you like them or thought they were exceptionally talented or just wish you could work with them always?
Well, I think the most talented one I can really get my mind around is George Roy Hill, who is
Oh,
not a stranger to wonderful movies, Butch Cassidy, The Sting, many, many others. But he was one of those fellows who came out of live TV, like Lumet and Franklin Schaffner and Frankenheimer. That was a unique group of people who actually, almost like at the beginning of the movie business, this was the beginning of the television business.
right.
And these guys invented live television in terms of how to shoot, how to prep. And he was a joy to work with him. He was very talented. This was a movie called The World of Henry Orient
Oh,
with,
yeah.
with Peter Sellers. And I had a really good time on that. And I guess that answers your question.
You liked Peter Sellers. I remember you telling me you liked Peter Sellers. He was a,
I really did. I mean, he was incredibly talented. I mean, most people don't know he started in radio, and he was incredible with voices. He had a thing called the Goon Squad with Spike Milligan. And they were all kinds of voices, and the Pythons kind of picked up from that kind of crazy, you know. And I remember on Henry Orient, he asked me, he wanted to break into Brooklynese from being a BS uh, conductor of an orchestra of terrible music. And when he got angry, he wanted to break out into Brooklynese. So he said to me, "What kind of accent do you have?" I said, "I'm from the Bronx." He said, "Well, anyone here from Brooklyn? I like Brooklyn accents." So I got a prop man or a grip, I don't remember, and I put him in his trailer. And 5 minutes later, it came out, I had the guy nailed. Absolutely nailed. I mean, that's how good he was. But he was a slightly strange as well. One night we finished shooting, and like you always do, you go to the next set to rehearse in the evening so that the crew can come in early and light it, and you start shooting at 8:30. So we went down to rehearse. Peter Sellers looks around the set and says to George Roy Hill, "George, I can't shoot in this set." And George said, "Why, Peter?" He says, "It's green." He says, "I know it's green. I like the green." He says, "I can't shoot in green, George." So George looks at me like, "Boy, this is some wacko, right?" And he said, "What should we do?" So I said, "George, go to the next stage work, rehearse that, and I'll have the set repainted." And Peter says, "Oh, no, you got to tear this set down and then repaint it." I said, "Absolutely, Peter. Like, of course we were going to do that, right?" So, but that was Peter. I mean, it was slightly off.
That's very funny. That is really funny. Yeah, one thing about this business, you work with a lot of characters. Um, I remember you had a project, I don't remember whether you directed it or produced it, Johnny Dangerously.
Yeah, I produced that. I mean, it was only 8 years in the making. That shows you what our business is. Yeah, it was with Michael Keaton. It was a send up of the Cagney movies, of the
Ah,
James Cagney movies. We had Joe Piscopo, Danny DeVito, Mary Lou Henner. And it was a pretty funny movie. But one of the oddities of our business, even though you have 8 years into a project, is that Fox had no movies in that year. So this little silly summer picture was a send up. They moved to Christmas, which absolutely killed it. I didn't even stay around for the opening. I went to Hawaii on vacation. I had 8 years into a picture, and they decided to put it at Christmas. So it was reviewed right after passage to India, right? So we got killed. We absolutely got killed. And that was 8 years of my life. I don't mean like every day, but from beginning to end.
that's funny, man, this business.
Funny to me.
But now tell me about Entrapment. That was an interesting and very successful film.
Yeah, it was. We got Sean Connery, which is the good news and the bad news. Difficult fellow. I originally came up with the idea. It's kind of like To Catch a Thief, more modern. And I wrote the original screenplay,
Oh, wow.
and Fox bought it, and then they brought in 19 other writers
Of course.
just it needed some work, And Ron Bass ended up with one of the 4 or 5 credits. I ended up with story credit. And Ron was, won the Oscar for Rain Man, among others. Very talented fellow, ex-lawyer. He used to work. His company was named Pre-Dawn Productions because before he went into his law firm, at 4 in the morning, he'd get up and write. So, and he became, he worked with, I think he wrote Jonathan Sanger's first picture, Emerald, something Emerald, the war story.
Yeah, yeah.
Ron wrote that because he knew him. Good guy. I mean, very good guy, very smart.
I remember in the third year of Knots Landing, which was always in one of the top 20 shows. Harvey Shepard at CBS comes in. We have this whole, a dozen of us around a table, and he walks in and he says, I don't know what it is about this show. He says, I don't get it. But my wife likes it. And I remember thinking, God help us, his wife has a bad day. We're all looking for work. That was how they made that decision. Not the 32 share.
You know what gave me an education in that kind of crazy talk? The commercials we did, because working with some of these advertising people who are deathly afraid to make a decision. I'll give you one thing. I always say this because it just makes me laugh. And we were doing a series of Maxwell House commercials at the VPR. And their big thing was they have to pick out a coffee pot for 1964, the pot. Now, to me, it could be any pot. I didn't care. I'd shoot whatever they wanted. So I said to the prop guy, get 20 pots, put it on the prop table, and they'll come. They came over 4 o'clock. They circle that table like Custer's last stand. They wore out the cement. And finally, at 7 o'clock, I had a date. I pick up a pot and I say, guys, I like this pot. What do you think? Then you hear everybody inhale the breath intake, like they got to make a decision. So guy says, I pick up a pot and I said, what do you think of this one, guys? I like this one. So one genius looks at me and he said, we can't use that pot. I said, why? He says, it's electric. I said, well, I have an electric pot. He says, I do too, but we have an enormous area in northwestern Canada where they don't have electricity, so we can't show this. I said, if they don't have electricity, how are they going to see the commercial? That prepares you for anything that's going to come in the feature world.
You know what drove me out of the commercial business? We were shooting in a house in New Jersey. We got there at 6 in the morning. It was now 2 o'clock the next morning. This was our 20th hour. And the art director and the executive from the advertising agency got into an argument over which tooth they were going to put the sparkle. And I remember saying to myself, wherever they put it, it's the last minute I'm ever going to be involved in commercials.
All right. I'll give you my ultimate, the thing that actually literally walked off the commercial business. We were doing a series of shaving cream commercials. And oddly enough, they gave us a very clear charge. We want to shoot in a town that looks like Peyton Place. I said, well, thank you. That's very clear. So I send guys up to Pennsylvania, to Massachusetts, Long Island, and this genius gets in a helicopter and goes to the 3 final places. And we shoot a dummy commercial, as a real professional thing. So we come back and we're very proud of our presentation because it was pretty good. The lights come on and the head guy says, oh, we can't use any of this. I said, why? He says, it looks like Peyton Place. I said, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. I got in the elevator. I got in a cab. I went back to VPI. I said, guys, I'm out of here. I'm never doing another commercial again. And that's what drove me off.
But as I got older and I retired and I have written, I realized for me, it is the journey. I just enjoy writing. And the reason, we used to go to baseball, we used to go to football. I don't want to be around 30,000 people. We were always on movie sets with 100 strangers or 60 strangers. I don't want to do that. I'm happiest when I'm in my own world writing. And I know you're a talented guy because I've read your stuff.
Well, it turns out that Mel wanted to do his second picture called The 12 Chairs, which was a big Russian period 1920 film that was going to be shot in Yugoslavia. I says, well, I will produce it and I'll do second unit directing, and that credit I want, and that's how the producer thing. And then from then on, after I split from him, I did my own.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you telling me a story. I think it was you. You were in a meeting and they were going over the script, the executives, and they were laughing and taking and you thought to yourself, oh, this is a slam dunk. These guys are screaming with laughter. And the meeting came to an end and somebody in the room said, so do we have a deal? And the executive says, well, geez, we don't know. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we think it's funny, but that doesn't mean it's funny. Which is another thing I could hear an executive saying, but I think they mean is it reads funny, but will it play funny? The dialogue is.
They don't even know what they were saying. I mean, mostly, for instance, somebody would say to me, or one genius said to me, tell me why it's funny and we'll make it. I says, if you don't know why it's funny, don't make it.
Yeah.
They actually, remember, they are hiring people who know how to do things because they don't know how to do things.
Right.
So there's a misconnect, a miscommunication between the two sides, because one knows how to make a movie and the other one makes the decisions that let you make the movie.
Right.
And that's the struggle.
Yeah, for sure. I remember you telling me you've worked from some foreign, international, directors. Am I right? Francis Verbeer?
Yeah, Francis Weber. He's Francis' #1 guy. He did one picture here in English, which was not his forte, that I worked with him on as producer. Let's see, they had 9 names. I think the final name was Out on a Limb. Originally, it was Buzzsaw. I mean, it didn't work. The picture didn't work. But Francis was a playwright who wrote La Cage aux Folles and Le Chèvre. And,
I love Le Chèvre.
They bought all his film, American rights to his films, and then murdered them. Even Billy Wilder screwed it up. But his films are particularly French and wonderful. I mean, it's one of his great pictures. It was called Pain in the Ass, and he puts people together in scenes like Victor Lanoux is an assassin in a hotel. In the next room is like the French Gene Wilder who's trying to kill himself. And then this guy gets onto his cuff and he won't let go. I mean, the two of them together, it's just hysterical. And Billy Wilder made it called Buddy Buddy with like Walter Matthau. But I'm just saying, I appreciate the luck. You have to deliver when the luck turns your way. But I totally chalk up whatever I accomplish to my wife and to my intellect. I always had fun, that. We used to laugh a lot on sets. That was part of my thing, that I'm having fun, so everybody else is having fun, so it's not work.
But your sense of humor did work on the set. I remember, and I've quoted you, if the director got on your case, we're over here now, guys, we're going to do this shot. No, we're not there. We're over here. Don't you, without missing a beat, you go, that's what I said, guys. We're over here. We're doing this. And the crews, I mean, it took the sting out of the moment, and the crews, it relaxed the crew. I thought that was the ability to do that was a great part of your talent.
Well, let me tell you, it wasn't conscious. It's just the way I am. I like to have fun. I do it in life too. So it's not like I have to put something up.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
I never, honest to God, never thought I worked a day in my life in the film business. I loved it. I mean, I told you on Requiem for a Heavyweight, I could not get along with Jackie Gleason because he was not sober a lot. In fact, almost never. And although he's a wonderful actor, he really was dark. And as the second, I was the one who used to bring him from the trailer to the set. But he always forgot where the trailer was, and he'd start cursing me, Hertzberg, you son of a, where's my trailer? I said, it's in the same place, Jackie. So he'd fire me twice a week, right? So Jack Roseberg, God bless him, who was our production manager and one of my mentors, would embarrass him and say, Jackie, this kid makes $200 a week. He works 300 hours a week. You're going to be a big shot to fire this kid? He's not, pal. If I say forget it, forget it. 10 minutes later, Hertzberg, you son of a bitch, where's my trailer? I mean, it went on all winter, Joe. You know what it is to shoot in the winter and have a guy yelling at you from morning till night? And I loved it.
Yeah.
I couldn't get enough of it. I mean, Anthony Quinn came in 5:30 in the morning for prosthetics, right? I was there at 5:30 in the morning until 11. I mean, and I loved it. And I was 22 years old, Joe. How was I not going to love it?
You know what else? You and I, more you than I, were part of cinema history. We both worked for John Huston. Remember?
Yeah,
Kremlin Letter came to New York.
it was wonderful, Joe. Here's a guy who was working for money. That was one of his pictures he was doing for the money. Remember, he showed up at noon and was done at 1 o'clock. That's what he cared about, you know. I mean, it was. I remember we were shooting in the Spanish Museum up on like 125th Street.
Area, yeah.
It was there, gorgeous. Remember, it was a gorgeous place. I didn't even know it existed. So everybody's walking, hanging around from 8 o'clock. He comes in at noon. So he says to me, have you read the sides? I said, yes, sir. He said, what do you think? He says to me, John Huston says to me. I says, well, you got this. Why don't you try this? He said, let's do that. And he goes, sit and reads the paper. And I was working with the great John Huston.
Do you remember we pulled off a kidnapping in front of the UN? And on that morning, the car pulled. So we had the whole First Avenue cars, cops, lights. He came in early in the morning, we all gathered around. We're going to do this. The car pulls up. The guy gets out. He wanted to time it to when all the secretaries came streaming out of the building. So it had to be 12:01 lunch. And at 7, he went and sat in his chair and read his art books. I remember being a nervous wreck because I thought the chances of this working on somewhere between nil and further nil.
Yeah.
And at 12:01, we shot. The doors opened up. The secretary streamed out. The car came. The guys ran. The thing. Okay, cut. Got it. Next. One shot. All day. Well, that stayed in my mind. Do you remember?
Well, let's face it. I was a little not intimidated, but it's John Huston. I mean, he's a guy to be respected and all, but to see that he really didn't give a damn. You know what I mean? He was doing it for the money, and it was disappointing. I also remember once we were shooting up in a cemetery somewhere up in Westchester
With Richard Bone.
And he comes up and he spends an hour and a half reading all the headstones in the cemetery. With the crew standing around.
Maybe he was thinking of changing his name.
Well, it was just, listen, it was what it was, but there were people who, some of them were less than their reputations. I remember Otto Preminger, you know this story.
Yeah.
Otto Preminger came into Boston shooting for a month on The Cardinal. It's a big international movie with international movie stars. This is probably the 5th city they were shooting in. And so I got a call from his production manager that Otto Preminger heard about me, wants to meet me, but he'll only pay scale. And I sent word back. I said, tell Mr. Preminger he's 10 years too late. I don't do scale anymore. And he kept after and kept after. And then he finally wanted to meet. Can we curse on this, Joe, or not?
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you what I told him. I come up to see him, and he's sitting on the desk, in the front of the desk. And he uses the third person. He said, I understand you don't want to work with Otto Preminger, like he was an Otto Preminger. I said, Michael Hertzberg would love to work with Otto Preminger. But Otto Preminger is going to have to pay Michael Hertzberg his rate. He says, well, I can't do that. He says, I have a very low budget. He's all over the world, right? So finally it got to, he says, you should work for Otto Preminger. The honor of working for Otto. And you know me. I said, Otto Preminger, I have no problem telling you to go fuck yourself. And he started to laugh because he was a bully. I mean, I punctured his helium. He says, now I want you more than ever. He says, well, you pay me, I'll be here. Never happened. Turns out, I found out years later, in his deal, what he had was any money under budget he kept. So he wasn't going to pay over scale to me. But I had no problem, absolutely none, with playing this game with this. I mean, this is an you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's great.
yeah,
I'm going to end on that because that's a great story. Thanks for doing this, Mike. I love you. I'll see you soon.
It was worth the hassle, Joey.
Take care, man. Be well.
Okay, Joe. Thanks.